She's a charter member of Melfort Toastmasters Club and a member of the BLT Advanced Club in Regina. She is currently taking on area director for the 4th time in 12 years and has served in all club officer roles. Laurel has served as District 42 Administration Manager, acted as Secretary for her Union Proposals Conference, and is the current Melfort Club Secretary. In those roles, she has learned to take notes effectively so she can create minutes for business meetings for groups from 4 people to 400. The project Laurel is working on today is using presentation software, a Pathways Level 3 elective. Please welcome LaurelKorbo, DTM, with her presentation, Creating Effective Notes. And you may go ahead.
Most people hate meetings. One of the most common complaints, no action is taken after the meeting. Maybe people forget or didn't pay attention. Maybe they didn't know who was assigned the actual task. A great way to prevent that frustration of missed tasks and deadlines: take good quality, useful notes in your meetings. What good quality notes means will change depending on the purpose of your notes. Are you studying for an exam? Are you having a phone conversation with a repair person? Are you having a meeting with your team to plan the week? Or is it a structured business meeting where decisions are being made? These all require different levels of note-taking and different levels of perfection. Are the notes only for you? Are you using your notes to communicate an action plan to others? Are you sharing notes with someone who's absent? Are there just a few important points or a huge amount of data? Will you be able to refer to your notes when you need that information? Is it part of a learning process or is it record keeping? We learn a lot of different studying strategies in our school years, including taking notes in class. Maybe you write every single word the teacher says, or do you write just a few key points? I remember having those huge rolling projector transparencies. Some of you won't remember that, but you'd be expected to write every word and somehow remember it all. I find, and studies have shown, that taking verbatim notes doesn't allow you to synthesize and internalize that information as much as other note-taking systems. However, kinesthetic note-taking can allow you to interpret the lecture information in your own way. So you would write keywords, summarize after the event, use mind maps during or after, review and revise those notes after the meeting to ensure they're clear and useful. But we don't always need to internalize all that information when you take notes. If you're making an important phone call to make a plan, make an appointment, then you want to take brief notes. Recently, we had an alarm system installed in our house. When I spoke to the installer on the phone, I wrote down the date they would come, the options for the equipment we could install, and the costs. These things let me make the decisions I needed to while I was still on the call, and to keep track of the important information afterwards. When the installer came, the notes ensured I recalled what to expect. If I hadn't been able to make it to meet them for some reason, the notes would allow me to pass the information on so my husband could meet them, and he would know what the plan was. So there's 4 benefits to taking these quick notes. You can keep track within the conversation, make decisions immediately where possible, you can recall the information later, and pass important information on to others. Oddly enough, simple phone calls have a lot in common with note-taking in your meetings. If you're a meeting participant, you need to know these things, whether you're online or in person, or if you have a small group or a larger group. We don't always have a well-structured, detailed agenda for a meeting like we do at Toastmasters. Managers and leaders don't all run effective structured meetings. Meetings where a manager has the only copy of the agenda. Side conversations take place in between. Difficult to keep track. That is when keeping your own notes may be more useful. Regardless of how well structured a meeting is, it's important we keep notes because it helps you focus on your personal action items, be aware of the important actions of our team members, and know what information you will need to report at the next meeting. Now, if you're taking the minutes, remember, these are not notes just for you. This is the official record of the meeting. People will be taking action based on your notes. No pressure or anything, right? So we'll focus a lot of our time on these types of notes today, since it's something that we use in Toastmasters and isn't often used in the out in the real world in other community associations. Some of the things I find that works well is to use my agenda as a template. Work with your chair to ensure there is a clear agenda that is well followed. As a club secretary, for example, part of my role is to send the agenda out in advance or ensure someone else does. That means I can create a format that works for me when I want to take the notes. For you, take your notes in the most efficient way possible. I use a computer, as you heard, my handwriting, I sometimes can't read it a week later. I type very quickly. I started learning to type when I was 9, and we did all those Mavis typing tests. Some people still use shorthand. Those of us who didn't learn either of those things might have our own version of shorthand, whether it's writing or typing. With taking minutes, taking notes verbatim can be useful, but only if you make notes quickly. If it's a large group or you are not a quick note taker, consider making a recording. Even if you are recording it, don't depend on it. Things could go wrong, and it is much easier to revise your notes using the recording than to wait until after the meeting to start the notes. So no matter what you're choosing to do, always keep notes of some sort. Include at least the most important information while you're taking those notes during the meeting itself. So what's the best way to take your minutes? Take comprehensive notes during the meeting, but it doesn't have to be verbatim. Only the important items. This is where cooperation from your chair will come in, as well as the group as a whole. Work with your chair before and during the meeting to ensure they don't move on until you've recorded the mover and seconder of a motion, the exact verbiage of a motion, the result of any votes, your action items, and any important information not already available. So if you know you won't be getting a verbal written report version of a verbal report, type up what you can. Maybe they'll submit a written report later. Sometimes people don't get around to it. If you can write down just the main notes, that can be helpful. So once you've got it finished, how do you finalize it to distribute it? If you've taken comprehensive minutes with only the essential decisions made and actions to be taken, emotions and action items, you can send them out almost immediately. You won't need to take out unnecessary items or edit it very much. At the end of the agenda, summarize your action items. That will focus your readers' eyes on what they most need to know after the meeting. Proofread those minutes to ensure minimal errors. When you send it out, it doesn't have to be perfect. Request your participants to inform you of any errors or omissions. That's part of their responsibility as a member of the decision-making body. Then you can send out revised minutes after sufficient time before your next meeting. And add those action items to the agenda of your next follow-up meeting so that there's a record of those items, whether they're completed or ongoing at that time. It'll also act as a reminder to your participants when you send out your agenda in advance of what they were supposed to have done, so they can maybe get things started, even if it's at the last minute. To me, there's a few methods that I've looked at that seem useful. The simplest option to me is use provided handouts, agenda, PowerPoint slides if they provided in advance. These will have pre-populated headings and important points. You just need to write down the most relevant items for you. Maybe there's a syllabus for a course you're taking. That will give you what you need. The Cornell method is another. You take your notes under separate headings, either in a page or notebook or a note-taking program, and then you summarize it and synthesize it into something more useful later on. Or mind mapping. If you're a more visual learner, this can help when you're reviewing it later. So let's take a look at how we might review and learn information. So there's the Cornell method. Take your notes under headings, they're on the left. Use either a page in a notebook or a note-taking program on your computer. Create groups and write in the margins your key takeaways, insights, and questions. Summarize them after the lecture or meeting at the bottom. Clean up the notes so they are legible and tidy afterwards if you are going to need to review them or share them with others. When you're studying, this is a great option. Creating those groups helps you synthesize and learn the information provided, whether it's a lecture, video, or a text you're studying. Summary, whether immediately after that meeting or class or later in the day, will allow you to reinforce the information so you can remember it later. And you can use these notes to review everything in detail or quickly read the summary at the end to just quickly refresh your memory when you mostly know it. Another option is mind mapping. If you are a more visual learner, this can help keep track of the connections between ideas. You can write on paper or there are software options. You take your central idea, say the fall of the Roman Empire, the subtopics like irresponsibility, and then expand that into your details. The nice thing about mind mapping is you can draw lines between multiple levels a lot easier than a vertical note page, and it looks a little bit neater when you do that. But again, review these, clean them up later if you're going to need them for review. Now, meeting minutes. Here's two separate versions of meeting minutes I've taken. For both of them, I used the agenda that was distributed to give myself an outline to start with. On the left, you'll see just a few items from a district executive meeting, a total of 84 lines in that file. And it's up to 6 columns wide. It's a lot of data to synthesize in there and get into something useful. The first 2 columns were pasted from the agenda, then edited as necessary. The third column was for motions, the rest for amendments and questions or comments. This is the version before it was cleaned up and the individual comments were removed. During the meeting, I kept track of who's speaking on what, in case they made a motion having to do with what they were saying. Often people explain what they want and then they make the motion. So this meeting was recorded. I went back to confirm exact wordings of motions and who made and seconded motions, as well as the spelling of names and the officer roles of each speaker. On the right, a simpler club exec meeting, just 4 people present, focused on just a few decisions. I left the detailed discussions out of it entirely. I summarized the actions at the end and appended individual officer reports afterwards. Because it was a simple agenda, I had the agenda from the chair in my emails. I replied all to that email, put my notes directly into that email draft. I then spent 5 minutes proofreading it and cleaning it up before I sent it, before I stood up and left my computer. So these are things that work for me, and this is how I get my meeting minutes out as quickly as I can. They take longer for something like a district meeting. Some of them had 400 people in them, and you need to clean it up and have it a little more professional, but a small group, it's usually a lot simpler. There's a lot of tools for note-taking. So what works for you? Is it a pen and notebook, laptop, or tablet? There's a lot of hardware and software options you can take. You can use multiple notebooks, revise and rewrite the notes into a second book or onto digital if you need it later. If you want to avoid wasted paper or wasted space, there's an item called a Rocket Book. It lets you take handwritten notes, scan them with your phone into a digital version, and then you erase the notes like a dry erase board, and you can use it again. There's online whiteboards for collaborative note-taking. OneNote or other software let you type in information as you go and easily edit later. No transcription necessary. If you're using new hardware or software though, or even trying out a new note-taking style, it's extra important to prepare in advance. Create yourself a template. If you're doing mind mapping software, for example, make sure you know the shortcuts, create bubbles and connections so you can be efficient during the lecture or meeting and you don't miss anything. So now we get to put this into practice. We can move on to the interactive part. How exciting is this? I'll need some volunteers to make motions and request amendments. Perhaps, Mr. Chair, if I don't call on someone who's got their hand up, you can let me know, as I can't see the full spectrum of everybody on the screen right now. So we have an agenda here, which is designed to cover the most important items at our meeting. Only item 3 is really substantial. The rest require a record of the decision or action taken. So please take a moment to review the agenda. You may want to copy it down so you can take notes, and we can see what your notes look like by the end. I'll get my notebook out here as well and follow along with you. Okay, so I'll be the chair today and welcome everyone to the HAT meeting. Are there any additions to the agenda? If there's no objection, no additions, I'll approve the agenda. Next, are there any corrections to the minutes from last meeting? If there are no objections, we'll approve the minutes from the last meeting. Any objections? Hearing none, the meeting minutes from the last meeting are approved. Now, our next item is the report on hats. Now, Linda did a fantastic job of making a report for us on hats at meetings. She stated that hats are enjoyable, and therefore, if we learn best in moments of enjoyment, wearing hats at our club will be beneficial. So at this stage, I would entertain a motion to institute hat wearing at all Woodland communicator meetings.
I will make that motion.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. A seconder?
I second that, Linda.
Okay. Any discussion or on the motion? Peter, since you made the motion, you could speak first.
Certainly, I will speak to, I have a collection of ball caps that I really quite enjoy. They have multiple colors, they have multiple designs and locations on them. Some are tongue-in-cheek, some are touristy, and I think they can liven up a meeting and provide an excellent inspirational theme for people. Also, I find it keeps the overhead lighting a little bit more controlled so people can see me better in a virtual format. And as a result, I support Linda's proposal to have hats mandatory at meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Do we have any folks to speak against the motion?
Madam Chairman, I make an amendment that hats be restricted to ball caps.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion?
I could second that motion because I'm Mr. Ballcap.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Any discussion? John, you made the motion. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'm in favor of ball caps because you can have some kind of uniformity. And even though they can become in all kinds of colors, of course, they won't interfere with, well, if you're having a virtual meeting like this, it won't interfere with the meeting. Colors should come through fine, and they shouldn't be too distracting to the participants.
Any other folks that want to speak either against the motion or any others? Okay, hearing no one
I think
against the
Lynn
motion,
has-
anyone in favor?
I do. I want to
Lynn.
speak against this motion
Yes.
as hats, when you're taking pictures and other things, hats just ruin the hair. And I don't like that. I
Okay.
disapprove.
At this time, the amendment is to restrict it to ball caps. Do you have anything to say about ball caps particular, Lynn?
Yes, they're ugly.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak to this motion to amend? Okay, I'll have the secretary read the amendment, the motion to amend, and being the secretary myself, the motion is to restrict hats to ball caps. Change the original motion to restrict hat wearing to ball caps. All in favor of this motion, raise your hand.
Point of order, Madam Chairman, are we voting
Yes.
on the amendment? Or are
On
we
the
voting
amendment.
on the motion as amended, which would be incorrect?
We would be voting on the motion to amend.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion to amend? All right, looks like that has carried. So the amended motion would be to require the wearing of hats at woodland meetings and restrict those hats to ball caps. Any more discussion about the amended motion?
Madam Chairman, I call the previous question.
I think we had one to speak about it. Lynn?
No, I do not like the idea. That's still my motion. I don't know if I'm out of order or not, but
Fair enough. Any other discussion on the motion before we call the question? All right, all in favor of the motion as amended? All right, that is carried. So from now on, woodland communicators will wear ball caps at all meetings, as per Linda's report on hats being enjoyable. Fantastic.
Point of
look forward to
information,
it.
Madam Chairman, point
Yes.
of information. Discussion is not recorded during a meeting. You kind of hinted at that, but it was kind of skated around. So only motions are recorded, but no
Yes.
discussion.
Thank you so much for that, John. Yes, we don't want to spend space recording that. There's certain meetings where it's required that you write down everything that people said, but in our case, it's not required and not super useful either, really. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 4, next meeting date. Let's fix our next meeting date. Any suggestions?
Next Tuesday at 7 p.m.
All right, will that work for everybody? And that would be the 27th.
Correct.
Online or in person?
Hybrid?
Hybrid.
Hybrid. And our in-person meeting location is
SAS Polytech, room A103.
A103. Okay, thank you very much, Linda. And our next item, adjournment. If there is no objection, the meeting has reached the end of the agenda. So it is adjourned. Yeah, look at that. I haven't had one of these for a while. So how does everyone's notes look at this point? So who wants to report on item 1 off the agenda? What did you write down for that?
Do you want me to go?
Sure,
I
Lynn,
can
what did
say
you have?
Laurel approved the agenda and then she approved also the minutes as read.
Okay. Anyone else have something different for that? I'm curious of the various types of note taking we have.
I put down the minutes of the last meeting confirmed by Laurel.
Okay. And Mr. Parliamentarian, would you say that that would be a correct way to take those minutes?
In the main, but if I was doing, I didn't bother because I've got so much experience in this. I would say the chair approved the agenda, or Chair LaurelKorbo. So I would name for the record who the chair was. That's my only comment there.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so for our hats at meetings and our fun motion, does someone want to tell us what we decided? What's the motion we approved?
Wearing hats at every meeting.
I put down that Peter made a motion to wear hats at our Woodland Communicator meetings, future meetings rather. And seconded by Linda.
Right, that was the original motion. And then the amendment, what did we have after the amendment?
I put down John amended the
Amendment.
motion that has to be restricted to ball caps at Woodland meetings future.
And Peter seconded it. Okay, and then you would put that motion to amend carried is how I would put it in the minutes. Anyone else that would do something different there?
Yep, me, of course.
John, what would you do?
I would do, after the amended motion was passed, I would do some wordsmithing and drop some words, and henceforth all participants at Woodland Communicators meetings will wear ball caps as hats or something to that effect. Because you can, once you have both motions passed, if you do have an amending motion, you can do some wordsmithing to it.
Awesome. Because the amendment will have changed part of it.
Yeah. It changes part of the meaning of the original.
Yeah, and then you would write down the motion as amended and then whether that motion as amended was carried or not.
Oh yeah, you'd write down the results.
The next meeting date, I wrote down next Tuesday, 7 p.m., the 27th, hybrid and room A103 at Sask Polytech. Did everyone else write something like that down? Anything different?
Mhm.
No.
Fantastic. Great. Okay, and then the adjournment. What do we write down when we write the adjournment down?
The time.
Right. So I believe it was adjourned at 7:37. I might have had that time wrong, but does anyone else do something different for adjournment? Any other thoughts on it?
Mine's the same.
So how many of you, I'm curious, how many of you took notes with a pen and paper? Me too. I didn't have enough screen space to actually open up the little email with the presentation up and the Zoom. So I didn't do that, but it would have been good to have a third screen to have the notes on that. But so I just did my really quick notes here. That's what my notes look like. It has the essential information in it. And then I can type it up and make it tidy and have all the good information in there in a way that is readable for everybody else. So any thoughts on taking minutes? What works for you guys? What do you do differently?
Is there a template for a meeting like that? Because if there was spots where it says, you know, approved, disapproved, or motions, amendments, then we wouldn't have to write amended and know where that was, or the motion. And then we could just write the rest of the phrase instead of
Exactly.
motion.
Yeah. Like in the district executive meeting minutes, I had an agenda and then I just copied it and created that template in the third column for who moved it and who seconded it. But I'm sure there are pre-created templates out there. Toastmasters International has some templates that just have your agenda and different executive on one side, and but then you have to create the agenda items within that template. So it's not a full minutes template, but there are many templates out there that you can use, or you can create one that works for you.
Okay.
I found it a lot better than what I have in the past. Is it any neater? No, it's still pretty messy. However, given the points that you had given to us, I was able to summarize it a little bit more than having to put so much information down. You know, I'd be furiously trying to write everything down. With this, I just took little points down instead, and using first for the first motion by Peter, and then what the motion was, and then Linda second, and that I knew it would be that I was the seconder. So there was little things that you pointed out that I could do that make it a whole life a whole lot easier, but I've still got work to do.
One thing I do when taking minutes where motions are involved, I say moved by Peter, seconded by Linda, that, and then the motion follows. And at the end of the motion, whether it's approved or defeated.
Looks like we have a couple minutes left. Any other thoughts or questions, ideas?
I guess in this format, we didn't do too much about like the physical formatting of minutes, but I've definitely used I would say a hybrid Cornell style where the side tends to be like the base argument or a key point or follow-up note, thematic. And then within the actual minutes note taking, I'll drop down and then bullet in and bullet in depending on the degree of subcontext under a broader agenda item or discussion. And it's tough because I try to record what people say, even if they're debating things, only for the sake of just a fulsome record for my knowledge, because I often have to share the meetings and then also use that information to run the organization. So it's a bit of a,
Some of the unofficial record that you keep for your own personal.
Exactly, or at least
recall.
my own knowledge of how to carry forward organizationally.
Yeah, it's a good idea to have that kind of thing if you think it's important. And sometimes it's important to know who's on your side when it comes to different agenda items too. So that can be useful to keep as a personal note. Okay, with that, there's a few of the most important things to take away for any note taking. Plan in advance, have an agenda, a template, find something, whether it's a syllabus or a handout, that you can use to plan your notes in advance. Make sure to organize your notes in whatever fashion works best for you. And then use the best note-taking tools that you have. If you're great at writing, do that. If typing is the best way for you to actually follow up on something, for me, it's putting it in emails or a spreadsheet. Do that. Whatever works best for you, there's a million different ways to do it. As long as it's well planned, well organized, and you review it and summarize it and tidy it up after, you will have effective notes and you will be able to take action or learn something new effectively.